Hello, I'm D. Here on the People Side channel, we discuss important topics from the side or perspective of the people. Today's topic is, what is capitalism? Of course, if you want to study this topic in more details, you should read books like Das Kapital. But today, I'm going to explain in a simple way, from the side of everyday people. So, what is capitalism? I believe that most people would say something like, oh, capitalism is free market, or capitalism is a society with free competition and opportunities for everybody to become rich. Or maybe capitalism is the ideology of free market, or the ideology of freedom and competition, etc. And no, these are not definitions of capitalism. So, a brief definition would be, capitalism is a mode of production in which capital dominates all activities necessary for running a society. So, mode of production just meaning like a political and economic system. So it's a political economic system in which capital dominates all the activities. So to understand this definition, we need to learn what capital is and what is not. So simply speaking, capital is any type of resource that can generate profit, that can generate more resources. For example, if you invest money in stocks, you do it in the hopes that it will make you more money, right? So this is capital. Other forms of capital include land and factories and machinery and natural resources, just to give a few examples. These are all forms of capital because they can all generate profit. And people who have capital are called capitalists. In general, we call capitalists a person with a lot of capital. Please don't think of a small corner shop owner as a capitalist. Also, you might be thinking, what about the money that I own? So if you're talking about money that you use to buy food and clothes and anything for your own consumption, this money does not generate profit, so it's a pocket money, not capital. Okay, so now we know what capital is, and a related concept to understand is private property. So private property refers to the ownership of a means of production by an individual or company. In more simple words, if an individual owns a private property, it means that they can use it, for example a factory, to produce something and then use it in the way they please. In our world, it obviously means to make money, right? People often confuse private property with possession. So, an example of possession would be a toothbrush. A related private property would be a factory of toothbrushes or the machinery necessary for its production. Your car is an example of possession. And a car rental company is private property, an example of private property. The house you live is obviously your possession, but a company that rent houses is an example of private property, and so on. So your private property, the capital you use to acquire it, and the profit that it generates, these are all examples of capital. So to understand how capitalists use private property, let's make an example. So imagine you have a factory, and you have 10 employees manufacturing a product and selling it. So you make sales, and after paying for the raw materials, electricity, water, and other bills, you're left with 100k, whatever currency. So would you distribute this 100k equally with your employees? So of course not, right? You're the boss. If I was the boss, I wouldn't. Obviously. You would distribute only part of this, let's say 40k to the employees, and retain the rest as profit. In this case, each employee received 4k and the owner, you, received 60k. However, the owner has not actually worked to produce the product. The workers have. In other words, the workers have received 40% of the profit for 100% of the labor. The difference between this 100k that the workers produced and the 40k they received is called surplus value. And the act of extracting the surplus value for their own benefit is called exploitation. In this case, you are exploiting these 10 workers. And that's how private companies expand their capital. They use the work of people to generate capital, but they redistribute only a small fraction of this capital to the workers. And remember, private property means that the owner can use it for any way they please, which means that the capitalists are free to increase their profit by increasing their surplus value, of course, according to the law and etc. So, some examples of how to increase the surplus value, how to increase exploitation. One way is to increase working hours without changing the salary, or decreasing the salary without changing the working hours. But these are too direct, so the workers will not like it. Normally, capitalists will use more indirect techniques like increasing productivity. Maybe they will implement new machinery or create a corporate culture that motivates workers to be more productive. Also, increasing the price of the products without increasing the salary of the workers. This is also a way to increase exploitation. So, these are more indirect ways. These are only a few examples of how capitalists increase their surplus value without us even realizing. But okay, sounds unfair, right? We want to receive at least proportional to what we produce, right? How do capitalists maintain the control of the capital? And the answer is very simple, with the state. Governments in capitalism always protect capitalists. Check any constitution of a capitalist country and you'll find an article that protects private property and other forms of capital. And the state will use violence to enforce it. In fact, they have a monopoly of violence with the army and the police. Let's say the workers start a revolt and try to take over their workplace. The government can and will use the police and the military to stop it, to maintain the capitalist ownership of the workplace. And this is why capitalists will always sponsor think tanks and make lobbies, invest huge amount of money in political campaigns and so on to make sure the government aligns with their interests. Basically, capitalists control not only our salaries and working conditions, but also the government, which influences many other parts of our lives, like the media and education. This creates a society that is increasingly divided into two distinct social classes, workers and capitalists. So let's explain this difference. So workers work. This is very obvious, but workers work. It doesn't matter if you work for a company, if you're a freelancer, or even if you own a small bit of capital to run a company. Like, let's say you have a restaurant or a corner shop. If you need to go and work every day to maintain your living, you are a worker. Meanwhile, capitalists do not need to work. They can survive through the work of others or from investments. Okay, so let's summarize what the capitalism looks like in general. So we have a society where the goods and services are produced by private companies, which are obtained by the investments of capitalists. The products are sold to the people, and us workers receive only a small fraction of what we produce. And with this small fraction, we purchase everything we need in life, including food, housing, education, health, etc. Of course, some countries will provide some basic service after retrieving part of our salaries in form of taxes, etc. And the owners of these private companies are called capitalists, and because they have economic power, they can and they will also use their capital, their economic power, to gain political power and to maintain their privileged conditions. So it sounds familiar, right? Lastly, I want to talk about the question, is capitalism good or bad? So this question doesn't make any sense unless you rephrase it as good or bad for whom? So for capitalists, capitalism is heaven. It's a system created by them for them. If you have capital, you can leverage it to gain more capital. You can use your money to pay for the best education, for the best health treatments, travel to the best places and make policies that benefit you. But for us, workers, not so much. Most problems related to wealth distribution are essential parts of capitalism, not an unfortunate coincidence. As we have seen, capitalism cannot exist without exploitation. It is not by accident that every capitalist country has homelessness, for example, because housing is also a source of profit. Providing housing for the poor will never be a priority. On the contrary, benefiting the interests of landlords is a priority. Same for unemployment, racism, sexism, homophobia. Unemployed people and people from social minorities are more likely to accept jobs with lower salaries and worse conditions. In other words, they are a convenient excuse to increase exploitation. But you may ask, these classes are not fixed. Doesn't capitalism mean that everybody has the freedom and equal opportunity to become a capitalist? Yeah, sure. You are free to save up money as a worker in capital and gradually build up your capital to become a capitalist. And if you succeed in doing this, congratulations. You might be a soccer player or something like this. But I'm sure you are aware of how difficult this is. The chances of you competing against people who already have a lot of capital is very slim. But there's no way for everybody to become a capitalist, because capitalists, by definition, depend on the exploitation of workers. It's a dialectical definition, so without workers, capitalists cannot exist. And they don't exploit people because they are bad or inhumane. They do it because they need to do it. If you have a company and you refuse to increase your surplus value, another company will do it in your place and have a competitive advantage. There's no such a thing as a goodwill or a badwill company. It's just that the companies that survive are the ones that successfully pursue profit. This is the system where we live in. If you want to make a more just society, then you would need to change the rules of the game, but that's a story for another video. Okay, so my name is D, and thanks for watching.